The morning sun cast long shadows across Pinewood Heights as Terrence Jackson walked briskly toward the bus stop. At 32, Terrence stood tall with broad shoulders, his dark skin glistening with a thin layer of sweat from the summer heat. He had moved to this small industrial town 6 months ago, seeking better opportunities after the factory in his hometown closed down. Pinewood wasn't exactly welcoming to newcomers, especially those with skin darker than coffee. The town's population was predominantly white, with only a small pocket of black families who had lived there for generations. "Morning, Mr. Jackson," called Mrs. Wilkins from her porch. She was one of the few friendly faces he'd encountered. "Morning," Terrence replied with a nod, adjusting his worn factory cap. The Pinewood Steel Mill dominated both the skyline and the economy. Its tall smokestacks puffed gray clouds into the otherwise clear blue sky. Terrence checked his watch. 7:15. 15 minutes to catch the bus and start another day of being the newest, and one of the only black, employees at the mill. Terrence swiped his ID card at the factory entrance, nodding to the security guard who barely acknowledged him. The factory floor hummed with machinery, the air thick with metal dust and tension. "Jackson. You're assigned to Furnace 3 today," barked Supervisor Reeves, a stocky man with a permanent scowl. "And clean up Adams Station when you're done." "Sir, that's not my section," Terrence replied. "I'm trained for the precision line." Reeves stepped closer. "Are you questioning me? Just do what you're told." Terrence noticed white workers smirking nearby. This wasn't the first time he'd been assigned the hottest, dirtiest jobs despite his qualifications. The precision line paid better and was less physically demanding. During lunch break, Terrence sat alone until Darnell Wilson, another black worker, joined him. "Saw what happened this morning," Darnell said quietly. "Same thing happened to me last week." "And did you notice? Every promotion announcement since January, all white guys." "I filed 3 applications," Terrence said. "Got turned down each time despite 5 years of experience." Later that afternoon, Terrence overheard Reeves talking to the floor manager. "Got another complaint from Reynolds about working with Jackson," Reeves said. "Says he doesn't feel comfortable. Maybe we should rethink keeping him on." The manager glanced at Terrence. "Performance review coming up. We'll handle it then." Terrence clenched his jaw. This wasn't just unfair, it was systematic. Terrence pulled his truck into the gravel parking lot of New Hope Community Center. The one-story brick building sat nestled between towering oak trees, its windows glowing warm against the evening darkness. Inside, about 20 people had gathered, mostly black residents of Pinewood Heights, with a few white allies scattered among them. "Glad you could make it," said Darnell, motioning to an empty folding chair. "Everyone, this is Terrence Jackson, the one I was telling you about." Murmurs of greeting rippled through the room. At the front stood a man Terrence hadn't seen before, tall, with salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses that framed intense eyes. "That's Marcus Webb," Darnell whispered. "Civil rights attorney from the city. Been helping folks like us for 20 years. Marcus nodded toward Terrence. "Mr. Jackson, we've heard about your situation. Unfortunately, it's part of a pattern at Pinewood Mill. Would you be willing to share your experience?" Terrence stood, suddenly aware of all eyes on him. "I came here for work, not trouble," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "But what's happening at the mill isn't right. Different assignments, passed over for promotions, comments behind our backs. They're setting us up to fail." Several people nodded in agreement. One woman raised her hand. "My husband worked there 15 years. Never got above entry level while training white men who became his supervisors." Marcus stepped forward. "This isn't about one incident or one person. It's systematic. But we need evidence, documentation, witnesses willing to speak up." "That's risky," someone called out. "People need those jobs." I understand the fear, Marcus replied. But nothing changes if we stay silent. Together, we build a stronger case. Terrence looked around the room, seeing both fear and determination in the faces surrounding him. I'm in, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. Over the next 3 weeks, Terrence became an unofficial detective. He carried a small notebook in his lunch pail, documenting every instance of unequal treatment at the mill. Names, dates, times, witnesses, everything Marcus said might help build their case. Got something interesting, Terrence told Darnell as they met behind the warehouse after shift. Payroll sheets from the recycling bin. Shows white workers with same experience getting $50 more per hour. Darnell whistled low. How'd you get that? Jones from accounting. She's been helping quietly. Says there's more where that came from. Their network grew cautiously. Eliza from Human Resources secretly provided copies of rejected promotion applications, all qualified black candidates. Thomas, a white forklift operator, recorded Supervisor Reeves making racist remarks in the break room. Even Mrs. Wilkins contributed, revealing that her grandson, a former employee, had saved threatening text messages from management after he filed a complaint. We need to be careful, Marcus warned during their 4th meeting. Someone from the mill was asking questions about who attends these gatherings. The room tensed. Terrence looked around at the growing assembly, now 35 strong, including 5 white workers who'd witnessed the discrimination firsthand. What about the new safety violations? Asked Sophia, who worked in administration. Black workers consistently assigned to areas with higher accident rates, no proper equipment. Marcus nodded grimly, adding the information to his growing file. Keep gathering evidence, but protect yourselves. They're watching. That night, Terrence found his truck tires slashed in the community center parking lot. A note under the windshield wiper read simply, "Mind your business." He photographed everything before calling police, adding the images to their evidence file. The intimidation only strengthened his resolve. Armed with 3 months of meticulous documentation, Terrence, Darnell, and Marcus requested a meeting with Pinewood Mill's executive team. They sat in the wood-paneled conference room, facing 5 white men in expensive suits who looked more annoyed than concerned. We appreciate your time, Marcus began, laying out a folder of evidence. My clients have documented numerous instances of racial discrimination at this facility. CEO Richard Blackwell leaned forward. These are serious allegations, Mr. Webb. But I assure you, Pinewood has always been an equal opportunity employer. Then how do you explain this? Terrence pushed forward the payroll documents. Same position, same experience, different pay scales based on race? The HR director stuttered. Those, reflect performance differences. And these accident reports? Darnell added. Black workers assigned to the most dangerous stations without proper training or equipment? Blackwell's face hardened. I think this meeting is over. If you have complaints, file them properly through HR. Marcus smiled thinly. We already have. No response. Now we have 2 options, work together on solutions, or we file with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and contact the press. Sounds like blackmail, growled Blackwell. Sounds like justice, Terrence countered, standing firm. We're not asking for special treatment. Just equality. You'll regret this, Blackwell said, his voice dangerously low. Pinewood employs half this town. And discriminates against a third of it, Marcus replied calmly. Your move, gentlemen. The morning air crackled with tension as over 200 people gathered outside Pinewood Mill's main gates. Workers arriving for the morning shift slowed their vehicles, staring at the growing crowd. Terrence stood at the front, holding a sign that read, "Equal work equals equal pay." Beside him, Darnell led chants through a megaphone. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. News vans from the city pulled into the parking lot, reporters emerging with cameras and microphones. The protest had grown beyond their small community meetings, drawing supporters from neighboring towns and civil rights groups from across the state. "Mr. Jackson," called a reporter, pushing through the crowd. "Can you tell us what prompted today's demonstration?" With cameras rolling, Terrence spoke clearly and confidently. "Systematic discrimination at Pinewood Mill. Black workers assigned the most dangerous jobs, denied promotions, paid less than white counterparts with identical qualifications." Marcus stepped forward, adding, "We have documented evidence spanning 5 years of discriminatory practices. Management refused to address these issues, leaving us no choice but to bring public attention to this injustice." Factory security guards lined up at the entrance, watching nervously as the crowd grew. Workers exiting from the night shift joined the protesters, their numbers swelling. By noon, 3 television stations were broadcasting live from Pinewood. Social media exploded with images of the protest, workers sharing their stories of discrimination. The company's stock price dropped 8 points before lunch. CEO Blackwell appeared briefly at the gates, his face ashen as he surveyed the scene before being hurried back inside by security. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead in the crowded courthouse as Terrence, Darnell, and 15 other current and former Pinewood employees filed into the room. Their class action lawsuit against the mill had finally reached its first hearing after months of legal maneuvering by the company's expensive legal team. "All rise," announced the bailiff as Judge Carmichael entered, her stern expression revealing nothing about her thoughts on the case. Marcus stepped forward confidently, his voice steady. "Your Honor, we are prepared to present overwhelming evidence of a pattern of discrimination that violated not only moral principles but federal employment law." Pinewood's lead attorney, a sharp-featured man named Reynolds, scoffed. "Your Honor, these claims are baseless. Pinewood Mill has been the economic backbone of this community for generations. These so-called victims are simply disgruntled employees seeking financial gain." The judge raised her hand. "Save the speeches, counselors. I've reviewed the initial filings, and there's sufficient cause to proceed." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed as both parties emerged. "This is just the beginning," Terrence told the cameras, his voice unwavering despite the pressure. "The truth will come out." That evening, Terrence's phone rang continuously with threatening calls. His sister's car was vandalized. 2 of the plaintiffs withdrew after receiving similar intimidation. "They're scared," Marcus reassured the group during an emergency meeting. "We've hit them where it hurts. But we need to stay strong, stay united. Their tactics only prove we're on the right track." Darnell nodded grimly. "No turning back now." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Carmichael prepared to announce her ruling after 3 grueling weeks of testimony. Terrence sat straight-backed, feeling the weight of his community's hopes. Company whistleblowers had come forward. Internal emails revealed executives joking about keeping certain people away from better positions. The evidence had been damning. In the matter of Jackson et al. Versus Pinewood Steel Mill, Judge Carmichael began, her voice clear and deliberate, "This court finds substantial evidence of systematic racial discrimination in hiring, promotion, pay, and work assignments." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "The defendants are hereby ordered to pay $7 million in damages to affected employees, implement court-supervised hiring and promotion practices for 5 years, and establish a diversity oversight committee with community representation." Tears welled in Terrence's eyes as Darnell gripped his shoulder. Outside, cheers erupted from supporters who had gathered daily during the proceedings. CEO Blackwell hurried past reporters, face flushed with anger and humiliation. In contrast, Marcus addressed the crowd with measured victory. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," he declared. "Pinewood Mill will transform from a symbol of inequality to a model of workplace justice." The mayor approached Terrence, extending her hand. "The town council wants to work with your committee on broader changes. This victory reaches beyond the factory walls. That evening, a celebration filled the New Hope Community Center, people from all backgrounds sharing food, stories, and renewed hope for their small town's future. 2 years later, Terrence walked through the mill as shift supervisor, nodding to workers of all backgrounds manning stations throughout the facility. The framed court decision hung prominently in the entrance hall alongside photos of the newly diverse management team. Mr. Jackson, called a young black apprentice. That school tour is here. Terrence smiled, watching as 30 students filed in, eyes wide with curiosity. Welcome to Pinewood, he greeted them. This place has quite a story. Behind them stood the newly erected community monument, a steel hand reaching upward, inscribed with names of those who fought for change. Below it, simple words, equality forged through courage, justice hammered into permanence.